I drove across the streets of Providence to visit my grandmother unannounced right after her hospital discharge. My name is Shannon, a 32-year-old data risk analyst who foolishly thought she understood her own family dynamics. An immediate wave of unease washed over me when I pulled into the driveway to find my parents' familiar, expensive car parked directly in front of the porch. The moment the heavy wooden door opened, my grandmother's face was completely drained of color, contrasting sharply with her usual demeanor. Her frail hands trembled violently as she grabbed my coat to pull me forcibly inside the house. She shoved me into the suffocating darkness of the hallway coat closet without giving me a single chance to process the situation. "Don't let them see you. Hide now," she whispered in a desperate tone that was completely laced with pure terror. Before I could even catch my breath or demand any explanation for her actions, heavy footsteps echoed clearly through the adjacent living room. The unmistakably cold voices of the two people who brought me into this world began discussing something that would forever destroy my reality. I stood completely frozen among the coats, while the shocking truth about my family started spilling out from the other side of the wooden door. But before I reveal exactly what they said during those next horrifying minutes, please check if you have already subscribed to our channel. Please let us know in the comments section where you are watching this video from, because we truly love seeing how far these stories travel. My parents, Ronald and Kathleen, always appeared exactly when they needed to maintain their meticulously crafted image of a perfect family. However, the vast majority of my childhood actually unfolded within the comforting walls of my grandmother's old brick house. While I found immense solace in her quiet daily routine, my brother Kevin experienced an entirely different upbringing governed by pure materialism. From a remarkably young age, our father deliberately brought him along to high-stakes business meetings to observe cutthroat corporate negotiations firsthand. They rewarded his blind obedience with luxury cars alongside exorbitant cash allowances for successfully completing arbitrary tasks. This relentless psychological conditioning taught him to view money as the ultimate measure of absolute power over others. He quickly realized that possessing immense financial leverage could effortlessly manipulate virtually any given situation. That specific financial grooming effectively morphed Kevin into a completely ruthless replica of our parents over the passing decades. His adopted worldview carved a permanent canyon of emotional detachment between us that neither side ever attempted bridging. We shared the exact same last name, yet operated in completely separate realities because I fundamentally rejected their cold, transactional approach to basic human relationships. Our forced interactions eventually dwindled into nothing more than silent nods during mandatory holiday dinners. The fragile equilibrium completely shattered when my grandmother suffered a severe blood pressure spike requiring immediate hospitalization last month. Rather than showing any genuine concern for her physical health, my parents alongside Kevin utilized this unexpected medical emergency as the perfect pretext to execute a hidden agenda. They suddenly transformed into fiercely devoted caretakers while establishing highly suspicious boundaries around her entire recovery process. Their first calculated move involved hiring an incredibly expensive private home care agency to manage her daily physical needs. They quickly weaponized those hired medical professionals by turning the nursing staff into an impenetrable layer of middleman control. My parents explicitly instructed the agency supervisors to screen every single incoming phone call through them first. Whenever I attempted calling the house to check on her condition, a stern, unknown voice would intercept my inquiry with heavily rehearsed medical excuses. Your parents requested strict isolation to prevent any unnecessary stress on her recovering heart, the head nurse stated flatly over the receiver one afternoon. She is my grandmother, so you cannot legally ban me from monitoring her recovery progress. I argued back with mounting frustration. My protests yielded absolutely zero results because the agency staff strictly followed the instructions of the individuals signing their hefty weekly paychecks. They actively restricted all physical visits under the convenient guise of preserving her fragile health. whenever I demanded a face-to-face meeting with the attending physician. The supervisors would cite privacy regulations to block my requests. I felt completely paralyzed by their carefully orchestrated blockade until a crucial piece of outside information finally arrived. The longtime neighbor and former probate judge, Mr. Martin, had been observing the property closely from his adjacent porch for several days. He possessed a keen legal mind, specifically trained to spot irregularities regarding elderly residents living alone within our quiet neighborhood. Late Tuesday evening, he sent me an urgent text message detailing the alarming frequency of unfamiliar corporate vehicles parking at her residence. "There are too many strange suits entering your grandmother's house during business hours," Mr. Martin explained when I immediately called him back to clarify his message. "These people do not look like medical professionals, which means something deeply concerning is happening behind those closed doors." His stark warning validated my escalating suspicions regarding the sudden isolation tactics deliberately employed by my own family. I realized that the vague daily medical reports from the nursing staff were clearly designed to keep me physically away from the property while those unidentified individuals conducted their private business inside. I thanked him for his vigilance before hanging up the phone to review the bizarre timeline of recent events. About 3 weeks before that suffocating afternoon hiding inside the closet, I began tracking down their guilty trails stemming from a simple mail delivery mix-up. The entire unraveling started when the Postal Service mistakenly delivered several thick envelopes addressed to my parents directly into my apartment mailbox due to a routing error. Curiosity completely overpowered my usual boundaries when I noticed the bright red urgent stamps covering the envelopes from various recognizable national financial institutions. Upon carefully opening the sealed papers, I discovered multiple final overdue payment notices alongside severe foreclosure warnings regarding their pristine luxury property. I immediately sought critical assistance from my best friend Diana, who works professionally as a senior corporate data analyst. I asked her to thoroughly scan through available public business registries to determine exactly what kind of financial disaster my family was currently facing behind closed doors. She spent the entire weekend digging through intricate corporate filings before calling me to her apartment, with a deeply troubled expression covering her face. "You need to see this right now, because public records show Kevin's company has 3 unpaid tax warrants," Diana stated while pointing at highlighted sections on her glowing monitor. The complex spreadsheets revealed a terrifying reality, where the supposedly successful startup managed by Kevin was actually bleeding cash at an unprecedented rate. My parents had secretly co-signed multiple high-interest business loans to keep his sinking company afloat over the course of the past 12 months. Their combined debts had finally caught up with them to create a massive financial black hole, threatening to swallow their entire fake upper-class existence. Diana patiently explained how the federal authorities were preparing to freeze their remaining assets, unless they could produce a massive lump sum payment within 30 days. This strict legal deadline perfectly explained their sudden obsessive interest in taking over the daily care of an elderly woman they had previously ignored for decades. The most chilling discovery did not originate from the digital databases, but rather from a printed email mistakenly shoved into one of those misdelivered bank envelopes. Diana carefully flattened the crumpled paper on her desk to reveal a preliminary court appointment scheduling consultation bearing my father's signature. The official document clearly listed the direct contact information for a high-profile attorney specializing exclusively in elder law alongside involuntary medical conservatorships. The sudden strict isolation protocols imposed by the nursing agency at my grandmother's house suddenly made perfect, terrifying sense in light of this new information. They are desperately looking for cash, and the only prey they are targeting is my grandmother's assets. I realized aloud while feeling a cold knot form deep inside my stomach. Their ultimate goal clearly involved proving her mentally incompetent to legally seize total control over her pristine property alongside her substantial lifetime retirement funds. Knowing my parents would fiercely block any direct physical confrontation using their hired medical staff, I desperately needed undeniable proof of their malicious intentions before approaching the authorities. I immediately drove to a specialized electronics store to purchase a discreet desk clock featuring an integrated motion-activated camera hidden within its digital display. This sophisticated security device automatically connects to the local wireless network to stream high-definition footage directly to a hidden surveillance application installed on my cellular phone. It also featured a sensitive microphone capable of capturing clear audio from across a large room, while simultaneously sending instant motion alerts whenever someone entered the designated area. The camera lens remained completely invisible to the naked eye, making it the perfect tool to bypass the strict surveillance network established by those hired nurses. I carefully programmed the alert settings before packing the innocent-looking clock into my bag, fully preparing to smuggle it inside her house during my very next unannounced visit. Returning to reality inside the cramped dark space, the sounds echoing from the living room began escalating completely out of control. The thick scent of old mothballs mixed heavily with my rising panic, while I desperately tried regulating my own erratic breathing. Through the narrow vertical crack between the wooden closet doors, I clearly heard my father utilizing his most intimidating corporate voice to ruthlessly corner my grandmother. He aggressively demanded that she immediately sign a comprehensive general power of attorney document currently lying flat on the glass coffee table. This specific legal paperwork would instantly grant them absolute unrestricted control over her personal bank accounts, alongside the legal authority to execute real estate transactions involving her historic property. He falsely framed the entire situation as a necessary administrative step required to protect her vulnerable assets during her current medical recovery period. My grandmother resolutely refused to comply with his coercive demands, while tightly clutching a thick folder of original property deeds directly upon her lap. She possessed a razor-sharp mind completely unaffected by her recent physical ailments, despite their deliberate ongoing attempts to portray her as mentally incompetent to outside observers. She stared directly into his eyes without showing even a single ounce of fear or intimidation regarding his towering, aggressive physical posture. "That is the result of my lifelong blood and sweat. You have absolutely no right to steal it, just to compensate for your reckless spending habits," she stated with an unwavering firmness echoing throughout the quiet house. The immediate stinging reality of her direct rejection caused Kevin to completely lose whatever remaining patience he still possessed regarding this frustrating situation. He abandoned his fake caring persona entirely to physically tower over her frail figure sitting defensively on the floral living room sofa. His face contorted into an ugly expression of pure desperation fueled by the looming threat of his own impending federal tax evasion charges. "If you do not sign this, we will submit the paperwork to the court and put you into a state-funded long-term care facility by tomorrow morning," Kevin threatened loudly while pointing an accusatory finger directly at her face. He elaborated further that their expensive private doctors were fully prepared to officially declare her legally incapacitated if she continued resisting their so-called generous familial help. My mother stood silently near the hallway doorway, watching the entire chaotic scene unfold without offering a single word of objection to their aggressive behavior. Seeing that she still absolutely refused to yield to their relentless psychological torture, my father violently slammed his heavy palm against the glass coffee table, creating an incredibly sharp, crashing noise. The sudden explosive sound made me instinctively flinch backward into the heavy hanging winter coats, hiding behind my continuously trembling physical body. My father then began aggressively tearing through the antique oak drawers located beneath the television stand to manually search for the original property certificates himself. He carelessly threw her cherished photo albums alongside various irreplaceable sentimental keepsakes onto the hardwood floor in his frantic pursuit of immediate financial salvation. I stood absolutely paralyzed within the suffocating darkness, while tightly gripping a wooden coat hanger to prevent my own hands from shaking uncontrollably. A profound sense of nauseating disgust washed over my entire body as I watched this horrifying nightmare unfold just a few feet away from my confined hiding spot. I felt completely breathless witnessing the undeniable truth that my own blood relatives were fully prepared to viciously trample an elderly family member purely for selfish monetary gain. The lingering, pathetic illusion of a loving family finally shattered into countless irreparable pieces, while the frantic sound of ransacked wooden drawers continued echoing through the incredibly tense afternoon air. Only a brief moment of silence passed within the living room, yet it possessed enough devastating power to completely shatter my final remaining fragments of faith regarding the people sharing my bloodline. The frantic sounds of ransacking temporarily paused when my grandmother spoke up again, with a deeply bitter tone cutting sharply through the incredibly tense atmosphere. She directly challenged their inherent parental selfishness by forcefully questioning exactly how my personal future would be affected if they successfully stripped away her entire remaining estate. She firmly reminded them that I was their biological daughter, who also deserved a stable financial foundation, instead of being completely discarded like worthless collateral damage during their reckless pursuit of immediate financial salvation. My mother finally broke her passive observation by stepping away from the hallway entrance to deliver a response so incredibly cold it practically froze the blood flowing through my veins. She did not express even a microscopic shred of maternal hesitation or inherent guilt, while effectively dismissing my entire existence as an irritating burden complicating their current desperate survival strategy. She has never understood exactly how this family operates. We have invested far too many resources into Kevin to simply sit back while accepting complete ruin now. My mother stated with an absolutely chilling level of pragmatic detachment. The horrifying reality of their collective betrayal somehow managed to descend into an even darker psychological abyss immediately following her unimaginably cruel declaration. Kevin took that specific opportunity to casually reveal a deeply sinister legal contingency plan he had already set into motion completely without my knowledge or prior consent. He confessed with terrifying nonchalance that he had already stolen my social security number alongside my personal identification documents during a previous holiday visit several months ago. He maliciously utilized my pristine credit history to fraudulently establish multiple out-of-state shell LLCs alongside several high-limit corporate credit card accounts, specifically designed to secretly absorb his mounting federal tax liabilities. He intended to systematically default on those newly created fraudulent accounts to ensure the aggressive government collection agencies would legally pursue me instead of destroying his own carefully curated public reputation within the corporate world. A profoundly heavy tension hung suspended in the stale indoor air while my father temporarily paused his destructive physical search to silently process the severe legal implications of his favorite son deliberately committing federal identity theft against his own daughter. However, any microscopic hope I secretly harbored regarding his fundamental moral compass evaporated instantly into absolute nothingness when he slowly nodded his aging head in firm, unwavering agreement with this criminal scheme. If using her name keeps us permanently away from filing for absolute bankruptcy, then it remains our only viable option at this particular moment. My father firmly concluded while returning his focused attention toward the antique wooden drawers. The agonizing pain of their ultimate betrayal violently ripped through my chest before rapidly crystallizing into an unshakable state of absolute freezing calmness. The pathetic childhood illusion of yearning for their parental validation completely died within the suffocating darkness of that cramped coat closet while silently listening to their criminal plotting. I slowly reached deep into my jacket pocket with perfectly steady hands to retrieve my cellular phone, without making even the slightest rustling sound against the surrounding heavy winter fabric. I carefully activated the high-definition voice recording application while pressing the device closely against the wooden door frame to permanently capture every single syllable of their ongoing explicit economic confessions occurring just a few feet away. Their own arrogant voices echoing confidently across the living room were actively building an inescapable legal prison that would eventually orchestrate their spectacular financial downfall without them ever realizing my hidden presence. Exactly the moment Kevin reached out to aggressively snatch the thick stack of original property documents resting safely upon my grandmother's lap, I forcefully kicked the wooden coat closet door open to step directly into the center of the tense living room. The sudden explosive wooden crash echoing through the quiet house caused Kevin to violently jump backward, while a look of absolute sheer terror rapidly materialized across his previously arrogant features. My parents spun around simultaneously with their eyes widened in profound, unadulterated shock upon discovering their own flesh blood had been silently witnessing their sinister criminal plotting from the very beginning. The incredibly heavy silence replacing the previous yelling felt suffocatingly thick, while their racing brains desperately struggled to process the disastrous legal reality of my unexpected physical presence within the house. They almost immediately attempted shifting their behavioral gears by adopting a sickeningly sweet tone, specifically designed to manipulate my psychological perception of the horrifying events that just transpired. My mother frantically stepped forward with a fake, reassuring smile plastered across her face, while desperately trying to convince me that my untrained mind was simply misunderstanding a highly complex corporate financial restructuring strategy. She smoothly lied about their explicit criminal intentions by falsely claiming the fraudulent shell companies were actually legitimate corporate investment vehicles established purely to legally secure my future long-term wealth. Kevin quickly chimed in with a forced, nervous chuckle while attempting to downplay his terrifying threats regarding the state-funded nursing facility as nothing more than a poorly articulated joke meant to encourage administrative cooperation. I completely ignored their pathetic, manipulative gaslighting attempts while firmly holding my illuminated cellular phone up high to ensure they clearly recognized the ongoing voice recording application, actively capturing their desperate verbal backpedaling. There is absolutely no financial restructuring strategy happening here because that hidden clock over there has already recorded comprehensive digital evidence of your blatant fraud alongside your deliberate identity theft, I stated with freezing clarity while pointing directly toward the disguised electronic device resting quietly on the corner bookshelf. The immediate horrifying realization that their entire sophisticated criminal conspiracy had been secretly visually documented caused the fake gentle mask to slip completely off my father's increasingly purple face. He let out a furious, guttural yell, devoid of any rational thought, before lunging violently across the vintage Persian rug with his large arms outstretched to aggressively snatch the mobile device directly from my tightening grip. Right before his heavy sweating hands could forcefully grab my shoulders to physically wrestle the phone away, the solid wooden back door leading through the adjacent kitchen suddenly burst wide open with an incredibly loud, commanding bang. Mr. Martin stepped confidently into the highly volatile living room, carrying a thick folder of official hospital medical evaluations while gripping his sturdy wooden walking cane with absolute, unquestionable authority. He had successfully received the automated motion alerts directly through the shared digital security application, alongside the live streaming audio feed, transmitting their horrifying extortion attempts regarding my grandmother's protected retirement assets. The surveillance data has already been uploaded directly to the secure remote cloud, so you need to step out of this house immediately because local law enforcement is currently on their way. Mr. Martin announced with the booming, undeniable voice of a veteran judge who tolerated absolutely zero foolishness within his former courtroom. His highly authoritative physical presence instantly paralyzed my furious father mid-stride, while the terrifying mention of approaching flashing police sirens finally forced my deeply panicked relatives to physically retreat toward the front entryway in absolute defeat. I stood firmly beside my grandmother while watching the true malicious nature of my immediate family become permanently exposed beneath the harsh living room lights. Early the next morning, a synchronized legal defense system protecting my grandmother was officially activated to permanently strip away every single authoritative power from those greedy individuals. Under the expert legal guidance provided by Mr. Martin, an experienced estate planning attorney immediately initiated the complex procedural steps required to establish a robust, irrevocable trust. This impenetrable financial fortress would securely hold her historic property alongside her entire lifetime retirement portfolio, completely shielding her hard-earned assets from external familial manipulation. The legal team drafted the binding contractual clauses, with the complete administrative finalization process scheduled to officially conclude during the following week. The comprehensive video evidence captured by the hidden clock camera provided undeniably clear proof of their vicious psychological extortion attempts inside the living room. Utilizing that crystal-clear high-definition footage, our legal representation successfully petitioned the local magistrate to issue an immediate emergency protective order against my parents, alongside Kevin. The court has granted the emergency protective order based on the explicit abuse evidence, meaning they cannot legally approach your grandmother within a strict 500-foot radius. Mr. Martin explained while handing us the officially stamped legal documents. The terrifying severity of their documented threats also triggered an automatic mandatory report to Adult Protective Services within the state jurisdiction. That specialized government agency officially accepted the harrowing case file to launch a formal state-level investigation regarding severe financial elder abuse, orchestrated by my own blood relatives. Their assigned caseworkers began aggressively interviewing the previously hired nursing agency staff to systematically expose the fraudulent medical isolation tactics my parents had unlawfully implemented. This devastating governmental intervention effectively placed my parents under an intense legal microscope that would relentlessly scrutinize every single one of their suspicious corporate banking transactions. Later that same evening, Diana arrived at the quiet brick house carrying a thick folder containing the fraudulent shell company financial statements she had compiled earlier in the afternoon. She sat silently beside me on the vintage floral sofa, while methodically helping me contact all 3 major national credit bureaus to officially report the extensive corporate identity theft. We spent several hours submitting the recorded audio confessions as definitive proof of my brother actively committing federal identity fraud. I have officially reported the credit fraud, so those ghost accounts Kevin maliciously opened under your name will remain permanently frozen. Diana confirmed while finalizing the last digital dispute form on her illuminated laptop screen. This crucial protective step completely severed my personal financial identity from the toxic criminal enterprise my brother had secretly built using my stolen social security number. Her quiet, supportive presence provided the exact stabilizing anchor I desperately needed while permanently dismantling the destructive financial traps. The final crushing blow against their collapsing financial scheme arrived when our hired legal representative drafted formal notification letters addressed directly to their aggressive corporate creditors. These certified legal documents explicitly clarified that my grandmother possessed absolutely no financial obligations regarding their failing startup company, alongside their massive, unpaid federal tax warrants. The attorney meticulously outlined the existence of the newly established protective trust to ensure those ruthless debt collectors fully understood the absolute impossibility of seizing her historic real estate property. This decisive administrative action completely destroyed their final desperate hope of utilizing her pristine lifetime assets to magically erase the overwhelming debts actively sinking their fake upper-class lifestyle. They were now completely isolated within their own catastrophic financial disaster, without any remaining vulnerable family members left to legally exploit for monetary salvation. 8 months following those incredibly tense days, the devastating legal consequences finally crashed down upon the individuals who had deliberately crossed the ultimate moral boundaries. Following prolonged periods of unresolved overdue payments, the National Banking Institution officially executed a brutal foreclosure order against their pristine luxury mansion. This decisive financial strike forcefully evicted my parents from the superficial upper-class world they had obsessively sacrificed everything to maintain throughout their entirely fabricated lives. They lost all their prestigious social connections because their wealthy peers immediately distanced themselves upon discovering the horrifying Adult Protective Services investigation attached to their previously respected public names. The local authorities confiscated their expensive vehicles while leaving them completely stranded within a miserable reality they had originally designed for my grandmother. Meanwhile, Kevin became the primary target of an aggressive federal investigation launched directly by the Internal Revenue Service regarding his extensive corporate financial crimes. The relentless federal agents thoroughly dismantled his intricate network of fraudulent shell companies while building a massive criminal case focusing specifically on massive tax evasion alongside his documented identity theft. They permanently froze his few remaining legitimate bank accounts while thoroughly scrutinizing every single deceptive business transaction he had orchestrated over the previous decade. His previously arrogant corporate demeanor completely evaporated while facing the terrifying prospect of serving a lengthy prison sentence within a maximum security federal penitentiary without any possibility of securing a lenient plea deal. I no longer monitor their chaotic daily lives because I actively chose to change my personal phone number to permanently sever any remaining toxic communication channels. I completely rededicated my entire focus toward enjoying true, absolute peace while living safely alongside my grandmother inside her warmly lit brick house in Providence. We spend our quiet afternoons drinking tea while tending to her beautiful front garden without ever worrying about malicious predators lurking disguised as loving family members. The oppressive anxiety that previously dominated my existence has finally vanished entirely following this permanent geographical separation. I successfully transferred my professional data analytics career into a permanent remote working arrangement just to ensure my grandmother never has to face another medical appointment alone. Our shared, peaceful reality completely validates the incredibly difficult choice I made while stepping out from the shadows of that cramped coat closet. Experiencing this horrifying financial nightmare taught me several invaluable lessons regarding the deeply disturbing dark realities of human nature. I previously believed that biological relatives would instinctively maintain a fundamental moral boundary they would absolutely never cross, regardless of the desperate circumstances. I was completely wrong because I witnessed firsthand how unbridled financial greed possesses the terrifying capability to completely obliterate every single foundational layer of human morality. When forced to confront such overwhelming predatory greed originating directly from your own bloodline, establishing razor-sharp legal boundaries becomes absolutely mandatory for basic survival. Meticulously gathering undeniable digital evidence while immediately securing professional legal representation serves as the only impenetrable shield capable of protecting yourself alongside vulnerable elderly individuals. Permanently cutting ties with deeply toxic relatives does not represent an act of cruelty, but rather constitutes the ultimate necessary step toward preserving your own fundamental psychological well-being. Thank you all so much for patiently listening to my deeply personal journey until these very final moments of the video. Human greed sometimes manifests in terrifying ways, completely exceeding our darkest imaginations, leading to situations where strangers treat you significantly better than your own flesh. What do you honestly think about this final resolution regarding their ultimate spectacular downfall caused by their own unrestrained greed? Please feel free to leave a comment down below to share your personal perspective regarding this specific situation so we can discuss it together.